Hey there, we are going to start setting up our landscape for our oil pastel drawing. And the way to set this up would be something real similar to what you would do for an acrylic painting, what you might do for a colored pencil drawing of a landscape. Um, we're not going to use a grid. Let me backtrack. We're going to kind of use a grid, but you'll see that in just a moment. First of all, when you select your photograph, it doesn't matter if it's at a portrait view or if it's a landscape. Most landscapes go like a landscape. That's why it's called landscape. But it doesn't have to be. Mine is not this time. And on the computer, when you decide where you're going to compose things, and that means where you crop and where you where you place like the little land back there. See, it's about a third of the way down. The rocks down here cover about the bottom third. So that's a one good way to do a landscape, is not to have something go right across the middle or right down the center to be the prominent thing. You want to find an image that has some interesting elements, some good color variety, good contrast variety, and not too many just silhouettes. That's kind of a silhouette back there, but it has a little glow. These rocks definitely have some color in them, even though they're kind of dark. So what you can see on here is I have made kind of a grid. I'm just eyeballing it. I drew a line here. I just kind of eyeballed where the middle is. And I just took my hand and just kind of went whoop, right down there. Same thing across the middle. And then I kind of did this first. I didn't draw the line. I just kind of imagined where they're going to connect and imagine where they're going to connect. And I made a little cross right in the middle. Just that, and you can get four kind of equal places. If I wanted to, I could draw another line right here, another one right there, another one right, just a little bit, just to kind of get those four equal spots. And for a landscape, really that's all you need to do. You won't have to be absolutely perfect in your pre-sketch. All right, I'm going to put this aside for a second. For this assignment, especially since you're doing it at home, it'll minimize you having to work on the edge of the paper and making extra mess. So we're going to do a little 1/4 inch border. And when you measure, remember, measure very carefully. That's a 1/4 of an inch right there. And always measure twice. And you're going to make this border all the way around. If you want to, if you just hate using a ruler, and make sure to make that, you can make that line dark, you can use a pencil. That's super close to a 1/4 of an inch. I'm going to line up the outside edge on the paper, make a little mark, make another little mark right down there, and that's super duper close to a 1/4 of an inch, and then I can connect those. Good to go. Okay, 1/4 inch border. All right, now I'm going to do the same thing here that I did here. I'm going to just estimate, and if you love to use a ruler, you can measure that. I'm going to come down here and make a similar mark that I did here. I'm going to, again, don't fold your paper. Get used to trying to do things just by eye. Okay, I'm going to make a mark right here and one right across and kind of make that X that's going down through the middle. And when you select your photo, remember you want to let it be a similar rectangle to your paper. You might find some photographs that are a square, like literally a square. Then you'll have to do a little cropping to make it more of a rectangle that's similar in proportion to this rectangle. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to do the math. Don't worry about that. All right, now we're just going to start laying out some of our major elements. So if I took this space right here and I cut that space in half, just like kind of using that grid system, then if I cut this smaller space in half again, I can see right where that land mass is back there. So I'm going to cut that space in half. I'm going to cut that space in half one more time, do the same thing. And I know that that land mass starts right down here somewhere, and it's going to go up right about there somewhere. So now I can try to draw that straight line. And again, if you want to use a ruler for that, that's great. Don't have to. And this line kind of goes up and down a little bit. I'm going to let it disappear right here because I see that glow almost disappears right there. And to make that top part, all I did, don't worry about getting every little tiny lump and bump. And sometimes I'll even kind of wiggle my fingers around as I draw that kind of a natural line. So I could have just done that, and that's totally good. Okay, next, what's going on next? I see some little shapes up in the clouds. And again, I don't have to measure. I can kind of estimate where that goes. That little light little bump there. Okay, it doesn't have to be perfect, and I was really rotating my fingers around. There's another one over here, that pinkish one up next to the purple. And there's kind of a tip to it right there. There's this yellow blob in the center. It kind of cuts right across. It's up here in the sky, bumpity bump, and let it trail off, and just let it trail off. There's another little edge right in there just below that. Okay, that's all. Don't worry about drawing every tiny little thing you see. You're going to imply a lot of those later on. Now there's also this yellow glow, like you can see right where the sun is. And the sun is actually right in the middle. And for your pre-sketch, remember this is your pre-sketch. You can draw these lines dark. I'm going to in a minute. And there's kind of these rays, this glow coming off of that. And again, look how fast I did that. It doesn't have to be exact. And there's kind of this yellow glow that's might have some little streaks and blending up into the orange. You can do that kind of thing. Now there's this reflection that goes right on either side. I mean, you could just draw a straight line, but let's place this rock first. That's almost right in the middle, right in there, because then I can refer to how far down that sunlight reflection goes. So again, with these rocks, you don't have to be perfect, but you can kind of get what they look like. And most of these rocks have kind of a light and a dark side. Like there's some light here and it's darker here. On these, I just kind of go wiggle, 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 excuse me, to kind of suggest the water reflection. That's all I do for now. And maybe I'll put this little triangular rock right up there too. That one's smaller, looks like a little piece of pie. And a wiggle, wiggle. Now I can kind of just give myself a guess at where that reflection is. And it comes down here, then it kind of breaks apart a couple times. Okay, you don't have to get every little molecule just right. Not at all. Let's put in this big one right here. So if I wanted to come over here, that's almost halfway up. So almost halfway up is going to be the top of that rock. And I can see that the top of this rock goes just barely underneath the bottom of that one. So boom, boom. Okay, there's a couple different ways to kind of measure and line up. And again, if you're a little bit off, it's really no big deal. So now we're just going to kind of fake in some of those shapes. And I usually want to get at least where the dark and light is. Okay, there's the dark down here and the light is up there. And a little wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. Okay, I'm going to stop the video and do the rest of this and show it to you when I'm nice and done. All right, here we go. Now I've finished my pre-sketch and just kind of got in the rest of the rocks. I was doing the same thing. I was kind of lining things up and make sure things were placed fairly well. Some of the tiny little rocks I might include later. I don't put in the pre-sketch. They're too small. I can just kind of wiggle those in later on. Some of the subtle little waves and things like that you don't want to put in your pre-sketch. Some of these little soft little ripples and so on, I leave those till later when I'm doing the oil pastel. Now, as you can see, the pre-sketch is nice and dark. After you kind of get it set, darken it up so when you have to trace it onto your final paper, and for oil pastel, the final paper is the exact same paper as your pre-sketch. It's a good paper for oil pastel. Okay, Bristol board is too smooth and the oil pastel won't stick very well. Now, I took a step ahead. So what I did is I took another piece of that paper I put my two little pieces of tape up here, okay, and I put it on my light box, or you can put it up against your window, and I traced it really lightly. So you can see how dark that is. That's my pre-sketch. And you want to trace it really lightly so you can just barely see that, especially since some of these areas are going to be really light and pencil will show through with oil pastel. Okay, so you really want to kind of trace lightly. Sometimes when I'm working in the oil pastel, I will go in and kind of erase a little bit before I draw there because I don't want the pencil lines to show through. Anyway, now we're ready to do our drawing. I usually take the tape off carefully so we don't rip the paper, and then I can use my pre-sketch to play around with my color. And in the next video, I'll be working on this one, but try to give you some things to think about on any landscape that you're working on. All right, there we go. See you next time.